Hello, everyone. Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. It's us, Humble Associates, with a special guest. We'll talk about our special guests in a moment. Lovely to see you in the Leadership Development webinar. And today we'll talk about talent and how do you develop talent. By the way, tell us where you're coming from. Let us know where you're coming from in a comment. We always love to see our wonderful global audience. And today is all about empowering the next generation of leaders. And as I said, we do have a bit of a special guest. So Carmen, we've been working together for quite a while. We'll let you introduce yourself.
Well, thanks, TK and Ari, for inviting me to your podcast. I'm very happy to be here with you. We've been working together in the last 2 years, and I've learned a lot from you. And hopefully today I can share with everyone that is joining all my learnings. And of course, let's learn all together from our experiences. So, well, to tell you a little bit more about myself, as you might notice in my accent, I'm from Spain. I'm actually based in Alfaro office, which is in the north of Spain. And well, I joined Kraft Heinz in 2015, which is pretty much 9 years ago. And why Kraft Heinz? Now I will tell you a bit my story, and then you will understand why. Since I was 7 years old, I played tennis. I love sports, and I think the sports has really defined all the values that define me today. Values such as consistency, teamwork, and winning mindset. And then thanks to the tennis, I went to the US to do my studies. I was a tennis athlete. And then I learned also a lot of the values that define myself, and values such as mental and physical resilience. And that's something that really has played an important role at work as well. Well, when I finished my studies, I wasn't sure what to do. The only thing that I knew at the time was that I like numbers. So this is why I decided to do a master in finance. And my first job experience was in Adidas, working as a finance analyst. I thought I had it all. I had the sports, working in Adidas, and I had finance role, pretty much linked to the numbers. But it was not until I joined Kraft Heinz that I really found my passion, which is HR. I joined Kraft Heinz because the culture was very special. It was a culture that really I felt identified with the values such as meritocracy, and also the people. I think Kraft Heinz put the people in all the decisions that we make, and this is what I like about Kraft Heinz. We are great teams, and I have around people that can inspire me. Well, since then I've been working in different countries, always within HR. And I will highlight my previous role, which was working for the International Management Training Program, which was a program that focused in developing the leaders of the future, the Gen Z, let's say. And hopefully today I can share some of the learnings. And then since November, I'm in the new role in operations in the factory. And yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Carmen. Lovely to hear all about it. And, I'm sure that our wonderful viewers will enjoy hearing about your experience when we talk about how, we can grow younger leaders. And thank you for everyone for letting us know where you're from and where you're typing from. There's more information we'd love to hear from you, which is, who are you? We'd love to always know who our audience is. So if you are an L&D or an HR professional, put an A in. If you're a leader, put a B. If you're an agile practitioner, put a C, and D for neither. And, it can be a combination, whoever you are. So Carmen, would you classify yourself as an A or a B?
I would say an A or a B. Well, hopefully a combination of both.
And we love the combinations, definitely. So let's, as Arif always says, let's get stuck in when we're recording our podcasts, because what we wanted to talk about is, like we've talked about the next generation of leaders, and what we're curious about is, why is it important to pay so much attention to developing these young leaders? Why are companies investing in that so much? What do you think, Carmen?
Well, I think there are many reasons of doing so. I will just highlight some of them. And of course, if there are people in the chat that want to add more, please feel free to join the conversation. I think first is the future sustainability of the company. I think we need to ensure that we replace the older generations, and we need to make sure that we have a strong pipeline of leaders that somehow maintain our culture, our values, and our operational effectiveness. I think that's the main reason to help the company grow. Then second, I would say adaptability. Nowadays, we know that the market changes very quickly, the consumer preference as well. And we know that by far the Gen Z are very technological, and they are digital natives, and they can help the company adapt very quickly. Then thanks to that, it's also a way for the company to get fresh ideas from the new generations. And these ideas are completely different from the ones that older generations have. Just because I think this generation has lived in a very interconnected or global world. So it's a way to really bring in the trends that to set us ahead of the market. And then I think also for the employee engagement, having companies that really focus in developing the leaders or the younger employees is a way to demonstrate trust and also commitment towards growing the future. And then lastly, I think is a responsibility towards society. This generation really cares about making a positive impact.
That's a big
And
one.
I think we have a lot to learn from them, let's say.
Yeah, and it's been a great experience yourself. So, Arif, anything to add on that? Anything to add to the reason why you think it's important to grow younger leaders?
Obviously, everything Carmen says comes from experience, so I'm not going to detract from that. I would like to just reinforce the point about the generational aspect. There is plenty of data out there already suggesting that, by 2030, for example, a large portion of the workforce will be millennials and younger, most of the workforce, and so what you might class baby boomers are retiring in vast numbers. So there's a real need to ensure organizations to ensure that they are looking ahead, planning for the future, and investing in their talent pool. And I think everything Carmen also added about experience that they can bring that's more diverse, but also just life experience. I think the lives of everyone, millennial and younger, is a complete generational difference to everyone older. So, what they can bring is something more dynamic, more relatable, more perhaps in tune with consumer needs. Maybe if you're in a organization like Carmen's, where it's FMCG, for example, or even in a whatever, even if it's a technology business, for example, right? So things are changing all the time, and you need a workforce that reflects the outside consumer base or user base of the product or services you're selling.
It's a very good point, and obviously, this happens, but it also plays into the next question I have, which is like, okay, so you've mentioned a couple of points, but what about the uniqueness of the younger generation, right? We talked about the digital natives, we talked about caring for the environment and being socially responsible, but from your perspective, Carmen, what did you find most important about this generation? What's unique about, this one?
Yeah, I think the number one I will say again, they are digital natives, so they've always grown up with internet, so they have access to all kind of information, and I think sometimes they struggle to not when they don't have all the information, they struggle to know the how, and that's something that has really been a driver in the Gen Z, but also on the other side, I think being native in digital, I think they bring new tools and they synchronize very quickly, and I think that's something that is really helping the company adapt quickly. Then other thing that makes this generation unique, I think, is the diversity and inclusivity. I think it's a generation that really wants to challenge the status quo, the traditional norms, and I think they push to have broader perspectives into the table. And we've seen also this in the trainee program. We have a trainee pool that is very diverse in terms of nationalities, backgrounds, studies, gender, and I think it only adds more ideas and more innovation to the table.
It's a very good point. And go ahead, Carmen. If there's one more, we'd love to hear.
Well, lastly, I would say is mental health. I
Oh.
think it's something that is very unique to this generation and is very connected with the health work-life balance. I think this generation is better setting the boundaries, and only when there is a balance, when they can really balance work and also their personal life, I think they really feel that they can bring their whole self at work. So flexibility, I think, is key
It's
to
a
this
good point.
generation.
Yeah, and I think, interestingly, what I have also noticed is like, yeah, I think, since they're digital natives, obviously there is so much information, of course. When it comes to well-being, it's actually a hard one to achieve, which plays into the next point I wanted to talk about, which is about possibly what are the pitfalls we need to avoid, right? So if we are charged, as you were and still are, and ourselves, helping young leaders grow, I was wondering what are the pitfalls to avoid. And Arif, maybe you want to add something in first before we get to comments and experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of what Carmen's maybe alluded to, and our experiences as well, working with young folks in the work we've been doing, helping Carmen and others, is providing them with opportunity, the right learning opportunities, and equipping them so that they are able to test their own self-sufficiency. One of the things I think where we see this being a challenge, or this not, if this isn't applied appropriately, then it becomes a challenge. Is, you've got very talented folks coming in who maybe come from who have been in very successful educational settings, and they have been rewarded accordingly, maybe led to believe that they're very good and very experienced already, but maybe haven't had the experience of working in a working environment where they need to be challenged, perhaps, and they need to test their own ideas out. They need to work
succeed,
in, and where failure may occur. So if you aren't designing a learning program, learning intervention, or supporting them in any way where they can't test that out earlier on, then I think you may be setting them up for future failure. Because what is likely to happen is, as they progress through their career, they haven't had that opportunity or that experience where they've, realized that failing can happen, that their ideas might not always be the right ideas, that they may not always be right. All of these things that they need to demonstrate and be put in a situation where they can appreciate all of that, so that when they do progress in their career, they are more resilient in dealing with change and volatility. So I would start off there as a thinking point, or as a as a starting point for any journey of intervention that you're doing with developing young leaders. Think about how you're designing that intervention so that they have that space to grow in the right way.
It's especially important, and I'll get back to it a bit later. But Carmen, any pitfalls that you'd like to add to what Arif has said?
Yeah, I think it's very linked to what Arif said. I think we need to offer a personalized learning experience.
Go
I
ahead,
think we need to offer personalized experiences. The training is not for everyone. I think we need to be conscious, and it's like Netflix, right? I think the Gen Z is more in social that we do, and we need to just target everything to their needs. Something that we need to do is to ask for feedback. I think it's a generation that loves giving feedback, that loves feeling heard, and if not, maybe they get frustrated. So I think opening this, to have an open channel, so have opportunities to give feedback on a frequency basis, I think is something that will help.
So, on that point, I think, Carmen, that's really interesting about feeling heard and feedback. Have you got any stories where maybe you've seen where if that isn't working and that loop doesn't exist, what the reaction can be from employees, especially younger employees who are going through this experience we're talking about? I'd love to hear if you've got any anecdotes or stories of experience.
Well, stories, I think it will be anxiety, the answer.
Right.
I think when the trainee, not the Gen Z, talking, in a general perspective, I think if they don't meet the expectation, they get frustrated earlier.
Right.
than previous generations, and not having this loop of feedback when you really see someone, if someone is struggling, I think is a miss that we can have in the program, in the organization. I think keeping an open communication is very important, because they are used to being with the phone or with communicating since they want.
Right. So do you have to change your? Do you think organizations have to adapt to the communication methods as well? So, like, I know many organizations have some kind of real-time tool, whether it's Teams or Slack or those kind of platforms to communicate both ways. Is that needed more and more, or do you need to now switch to WhatsApp? What do you think is needed from an organization point of view?
Well, I think we've changed, and if I compare now from when I joined, I think the communication channel has adapted also in Kraft Heinz. I think the traditional email do not work anymore.
No.
We moved to Teams, so now maybe it's more, to have an open forum in which everyone can openly share their thoughts. I think it's just to properly give everyone the chance to report, whatever they think, and to have personalized channels. One channel is not for everyone, but to have different types of channel. Yeah.
So there's an interesting thing that, we've actually, as we were tuning in for this webinar, you've mentioned something, and I think it's a good point to discuss it right now, which is the interest, as you said, and I think Arif also started by mentioning that it's important to create an experience, a learning experience for these young leaders of this generation that simulates the reality of work, especially coming from, in a company like yours, coming from a very successful academic background. So there is an interesting question of competitiveness. Sometimes, to fail isn't a greatest feeling for many people, and they would feel like, they're looking at, if there's a larger group of younger leaders training, they might feel it might be competitive. On the other hand, if there is no competitiveness, it might not resemble the reality of working in an organization and failing. So how does one reach the right level of competitiveness and the right level of challenge in this scenario? What do you think, Carmen?
Well, from my point of view, I don't think we need competitiveness to be successful. I think moving into a more collaborative mindset, I think is what makes us more successful. I think for this generation, what they need to learn is to don't be afraid of failure. And I think that's something that we try to bring in the training program, because they always play in a safe environment. And we really try to reinforce to them that they need to fail to learn, because it's fine to fail once, because you will not fail, let's say, twice. So I think we need to reinforce more and more, and I think maybe it's on us, on the leaders, that we need to collaborate, because we can only be successful if we play as a team.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Go ahead, Arif.
I wanted to just I totally agree with Carmen, and just as a bit of context for our viewers, we've been supporting trainees at Kraft Heinz this year, and one of the things in the teams that have been successful is those that have collaborated quite well, and have learnt to find a way to collaborate amongst themselves without much direction. Those teams have been the most successful. So I think I totally agree with what Carmen's saying there, and because that's been the only way I think we've witnessed, TK, how those teams have been able to quickly learn when things aren't going well, because they worked on their collaboration as well and figured out, okay, well, if we don't stick together, we won't succeed. So let's quickly do some learning, reflect, and then react accordingly. That I think those teams have been the most successful, I would say.
Yes, and I think this is a nice one, Arif, and we'll get to your point of view, Carmen, about the fact that they have been very successful, but an interesting thing, if I may, is that they found a way to collaborate without necessarily being guided to do so, without being prompted. So I'm wondering, from your experience, Carmen, like I have mine and I'm happy to share, but what is it how do you strike the right balance between getting and giving instructions, being really clear, but also giving space to make sure that they can find their own way? On one hand, we have had feedback that when things are vague, it might be difficult for them to find their way. But on the other hand, when we're being too prescriptive, it locks them in. So what do you think is the right approach in your experience?
Well, I would say that the approach is different depending on the person, but one of the key ingredients on making sure that everyone is finding their way is to create a safe environment and to create what we call psychological safety, in which the trainees in that case will have the confidence or the trust to report if they are struggling or if they need help, to ask for help. And I think there are leaders in practice. They need to also learn how to be a leader and how to be more to play the empathy, to really care for the team. So behaviors that we assume that they should have, I think, is something that they need to learn by doing. So I will say that it's not guiding them or not guiding them, it's that giving them the space so that they can feel trust to do things on the way they think is better.
That's a good point. What do you think, Arif? What do you think has worked best in your experience?
I mean, there is the trust element. I do think that when it's aligned to clear business goals in some degree, I think there's more buy-in. So the projects that teams are working on, if there is some clear, connection that, look, we'd like you to explore this area because it's important to the business, and the reason why it's important to the business is X, Y, and Z. And so by you exploring this area, you will benefit your own career, benefit the business as well. I think the buy-in naturally then gets generated, and there's more willingness to, work. Not say over and above. I don't think that's the right way of describing it, but being much more invested in being creative. In how they find solutions to overcome these challenges. So that I think I guess another way of saying it is a skin in the game, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you want to be successful, then it's going to impact you and the business as well. Perhaps there's more likelihood we're going to see greater creativity. That's my take on it. There's no science behind that, but I think that's just the observation I've had over the last few years of the work we've been doing.
Yeah, and for me personally, I think that it's an interesting one. And I think, maybe the education system, young people aren't being taught the resourcefulness as the older generations had to come up with, right? Because as you said yourself, Carmen, the information is so readily available. There's always, for instance, if I want to know how to do things like, do these wonderful streams, the information is all on YouTube. So it's a bit easier to be able to learn anything, to actually do anything. But when you come to the world which isn't structured like that, the world of, the company work, it is a difficult one to find your way. So I'm on the slot that we should, or on the opinion that we should actually provide some vagueness for them to find out. So it's, as Arif said, what happened is, like for instance, in the program we're helping with right now, 2 teams decided to collaborate, and it just so happened that 2 teams are actually in the on the podium for the third, for the 3 finalist teams of being the most successful ones. So that's, as Arif said, quite an important one. But maybe moving on quite slightly, what I'm really interested in is, okay, we've talked a lot about how is important and what should we avoid. But if we're working in an organization, a large or small, how do we actually make sure that we convince the leaders of the organization to actually invest more in that kind of a program of growing or taking in and growing young potential leaders? What made you successful, Carmen, when you started it?
Well, if I look backward of, again, the key ingredients of the success of the trainee program, I think the leadership sponsorship is critical. I think without the leadership, you can't do anything. And if you want to change anything, you need leadership. And they need to find the value of doing so. And we are saying the Gen Z helps the company grow, and it sustainably grow the future. I think second, it's important to have a program that is strategically, let's say, is central, but is flexible enough to adapt to the local needs of the countries, to the local needs of the trainees, that constantly keep adapting to the changes or to the to the needs with those feedback loops. And I think third, I think the power of the collaboration that we've had, is something that has made this program tremendously successful. And I tell you this because it was not a program that was on HR. It was a program that the business had. And we count with the collaboration of a lot of volunteers, people that wanted to work for the trainee program, that wanted to do, to contribute with their experience on a voluntary basis. So this is the link and the connection with passion. When you give people the chance to work on something that they love, I think they make the difference. They put time if they don't have it, and they can bring their best self, and then results, pay off. So I think those three are the main drivers of why the training program, I think, has been successful.
Quite a good point, and this is very convincing. Arif, would you add anything to that pitch?
I mentioned to you both, I was doing some reading on this before we came on air. Some research by some folks who are involved in programs for young leaders, and some of it I was reading. One study that was done, almost 44% were willing to stay 15 years or longer in the company they were in, because they felt more engaged as young people based on the program that was put together for them. So I think, right? So there's a retention conversation to be had. And I know we discussed, that there may be challenges with, or perceptions, however you want to say, with Gen Z appearing to be less loyal. That's always a conversation in the background. But I think I personally, I would err on the side of caution with that and say, look, as long as you are investing and you're showing you're investing and you're helping young leaders have a say, feel heard, as Carmen was saying, have an opportunity to solve some real problems for the organization, do it in a collaborative way, do it in a way where they have the ability to challenge themselves, support them, then I think you're going to get more engaged folks at the end of that program, and they will want to stay longer because they'll feel like this is a company that wants to invest with me, and feels that I add value to the organization. So, all these companies in this research I was looking at, they've all designed a program where teams were put together. There was collaborative learning, there was self-direction, there was a real business problem they had to tackle, and they were successful in various ways because they had to step out of their comfort zone and try and learn something in terms of process, in terms of solving problems, agility in our case as well. But, there are common threads in all of that, whether it's the work Carmen's done at Kraft Heinz or the work I've been reading about. So those common threads, I think, are what I've mentioned there. And I think if you are following those patterns, you're more likely to see more engaged young people willing to be a bit more loyal, perhaps, and stay longer and be more active in the future direction of the company.
It's a good point,
My
Arif,
thoughts.
and definitely retention is something that's easily measurable. I mean, measurable, and an important one. If you're talking to executives, as you mentioned, Carmen, you're going to get the leadership support. You'll say, well, we'll improve retention of highly skilled and high potential, as Daniel is asking employees, or it's
There's a question. We need to ask that
yes.
question.
So Carmen, I know that obviously the program we worked with you on is for the new high potential graduates coming in from various universities. But from your point of view, right, you're now in Alfaro. I'm sure there is many young people working there, not necessarily from privileged backgrounds and great education like we have in the trainee program. I was wondering about the opportunities being created for them. I'm paraphrasing a question from Daniel. When you see young people, not necessarily on the trainee program, how do you think their path might look like in a company like Kraft Heinz to become a leader?
Well, I need that the needs of the Gen Z, the needs of the young talents have changed. And something that, for example, like previous generation, like maybe compensation, work-life balance, it was enough. I think this generation needs constructive feedback and we need to manage very well the expectations. So I think by doing so, they're very pragmatic. They want to know the career already. So I think being close to them, we will guarantee that we can grow, the careers in Kraft Heinz. I think feedback is a tool for growth for them. It's not only salary, but I think it's a way to grow, and also giving them a job that really, fits with their personal values, that really they can play their best self, and they need to be very connected with the values of the company. So I think explaining how their contribution contributes to the mission of the company is a way also to retain this generation. And then lastly, I think we also need to transform our leadership style. I think a leadership style where our leaders show more vulnerable. We need to talk more about the personal or the human side of the leaders. I think a change in the leadership style need to change, and it's changing to make sure that we can also retain the leaders of the future.
That's actually quite fair. And I think there's another question by Sam. It's about, what happens, and Sam asked the question about the expectations of young people. And there's a perception that their expectations sometimes may, be that they want to grow quicker, advance quicker than previously. And I think you've talked a bit about expectations. But when you see these expectations, from your point of view, because you're also working with young people in Alfaro, how do you manage that?
Yeah, I think it's just having honest conversation, and really, if they want to grow, to make sure that we have an honest conversation about what are the things that those people are missing to make the next step. And sometimes it's not about growing vertically. Sometimes you can have a horizontal career to really have a broader view of the business, and then you can really specialize. So I think it's more about building, developing plans and making sure that the plan is aligned with the person with aspirations, let's say.
Thank you so much, Carmen. I think, this is quite important, and we're unfortunately out of time. But very quickly, Arif, we obviously have a podcast, so why should people tune in?
Well, because you'll hear from various stories that we bring in and various things happening around the world to inspire agility, inspire leadership in agility as well. So please tune in. We have some exciting news potentially coming down the line about our second season. So please do tune in, and you can download it.
A bit of a tease,
yes,
but more on
from
that
the various places.
soon. Watch this space, as they say. And finally, thank you for tuning in. Carmen, thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you, Carmen.
It was lovely to have you again, and it was lovely to talk again. Hopefully, it's also been a great experience for you too.
That's for sure. Thank you, TK, Arif, and then to everyone that has joined today.
Thank you.
And
Thank you
thank
very
you
much.
all for tuning in, and hope to see you soon. Actually, on the 10th of September. Watch this space, because I'm going to publish the next webinar very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.